She walked into the dealership with confidence and cash. But instead of respect, she got suspicion. Within minutes, they called the cops on her. What they didn't know: the woman they just humiliated wasn't just any customer. She owned the very company that financed their showroom. By the time the truth came out, the damage was done, and their careers would never be the same. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon when Dr. Naomi Ellison pulled into the lot of Sterling Auto Gallery, a luxury car dealership just outside the city. She drove a modest electric sedan, unassuming by any means, but the woman behind the wheel was far from ordinary. Dr. Naomi Ellison was a name that rang bells in boardrooms and tech circles alike. A self-made entrepreneur, she had built her fintech empire from scratch, launching one of the most secure mobile payment platforms on the market. By 38, she had earned a PhD in data security, raised millions in venture capital, and sat on the advisory board of a leading investment bank. But today, she wasn't there on business. She was simply looking to purchase a new vehicle, one she could pay for in full, upfront, with no financing. As Naomi stepped out of her car and walked into the dealership, she carried herself with quiet confidence. She wore a sleek blazer, simple flats, and her natural curls were pulled into a low bun. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Yet, within seconds of stepping inside, the temperature in the room seemed to change. The receptionist didn't smile. Salesmen glanced over and quickly looked away, while another customer, a white man in gym clothes, was instantly greeted with a handshake and a bottled water. Naomi was left standing by the entrance. No one approached. She waited. 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 became 20. Finally, Naomi walked up to a sales associate and asked if she could see the new electric SUV model advertised online. The man blinked, glanced at her shoes, then said, "Are you sure that's the car you're interested in?" There was no mistaking the tone. Skeptical, patronizing. The kind of tone that says, "You don't look like you belong here." Naomi, undeterred, offered a polite smile. "Yes, I'm quite sure." But behind her calm demeanor, she knew exactly what was happening. She'd seen it before, in meetings, on flights, even in bank lobbies. The kind of subtle, simmering bias that wrapped itself in civility but always gave itself away in moments like these. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly guess, was who she really was. And before the day was over, they'd regret ever judging her by the color of her skin. Naomi stood near the row of polished luxury cars, waiting patiently, yet painfully aware of how invisible she had become. For 20 minutes, she watched as sales associates bounced from one customer to the next, smiling, shaking hands, offering test drives. Every single one of them had been greeted within minutes of walking in. Some wore sweatpants. One man had brought his dog. But Naomi, standing neatly dressed with an air of grace and quiet confidence, had been entirely overlooked. Eventually, she walked over to the front desk. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm interested in the new EV Genesis model, the one with the all-leather interior and smart display system. Could someone assist me?" The receptionist barely looked up. "That one starts at over 90 grand, she said flatly. "Are you sure that's what you meant?" Naomi raised an eyebrow but didn't let her expression slip. "Yes," she replied calmly. "I'm very sure." The woman pressed a button under the desk. Moments later, a salesman in a slim navy suit approached, not with a smile, but with the sort of forced courtesy used when someone assumes they're wasting their time. "Hey there," he said. "Just so you know, that model's really hard to get right now, especially without pre-approval." "I won't be financing," Naomi said smoothly. "I'll be paying cash." That's when the smirk crept in. "Oh," he said with mock surprise. "Cash. Right." He chuckled softly and glanced over his shoulder, where a manager stood watching from a glass-walled office. The two made eye contact. The manager raised a brow, then whispered something to a nearby employee, who nodded and disappeared down a hallway. Naomi's eyes followed the movement. Seconds later, she saw a uniformed security guard step casually into the showroom, pretending to tidy up, but his eyes stayed locked on her. They thought she might be trouble. To them, she wasn't a successful CEO or a well-educated professional. She wasn't even a real customer. She was just a black woman alone in a luxury showroom, claiming she had money. And that, apparently, was suspicious enough to summon backup. Naomi took a slow breath. She'd been here before, maybe not in this exact building, but in this exact moment. Judged, doubted, dismissed. But this time, they had no idea how big a mistake they were making. Naomi, still poised despite the cold stares, pointed to the sleek electric SUV in the center of the showroom. "That's the one," she said. "Can I take a look inside?" The salesman, still half smirking, crossed his arms. "Ma'am, like I said, this isn't exactly something you just browse. It's a high-demand vehicle. Most people wait months for it, if they qualify." Naomi met his eyes evenly. "I understand. I'll be paying up front, in full. No financing needed." There was a beat of silence. Then, he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not even disbelief. It was the kind of laugh that strips dignity from the air. "You're serious?" he asked. "Look, I don't know what kind of prank this is, but we've got real buyers to attend to." Naomi's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice stayed calm. "I assure you, I'm very real. And I'd appreciate a bit of professionalism." The manager stepped out of his office just then, walking briskly toward them. "Is everything okay here?" he asked the salesman, not even glancing at Naomi. "She says she wants to buy the EV model in cash," the salesman said, with exaggerated emphasis. "I mean—" The manager turned to Naomi. "Ma'am, do you mind telling me what bank you're with? We need to verify funds before we let anyone sit in a car like that." That's when Naomi took out her phone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply opened the camera app and began recording. "I'll be documenting this interaction," she said calmly, "because I've asked multiple times to view a vehicle, offered to pay in full, and am being denied service based on—" "What exactly?" The manager's face changed instantly, but before he could answer, Naomi noticed something behind him. A staff member was in the corner, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. She caught fragments of the conversation. Yes, African-American woman, refusing to leave, might be a scam. Naomi's heart sank. They weren't just insulting her, they were calling the police. She turned the camera toward the man on the phone, then back to the manager. "Are you calling the authorities?" she asked, her voice still level. "Over a vehicle inquiry?" The manager stiffened. "We have the right to ensure the safety of our staff and property." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "And what part of me calmly asking about a car suggests a threat?" Neither man answered. Inside, Naomi could feel her pulse rising, but on the outside, she remained composed, recording everything. The judgment, the laughter, the denial, the fear they tried to disguise as policy. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't back down. Because if they wanted to paint her as the problem, she was going to make sure the whole world saw the truth. The quiet murmur of the dealership broke into uneasy whispers as red and blue lights flickered through the glass showroom walls. Two uniformed police officers stepped inside, their boots echoing on the marble floors. The air grew tense. Conversations halted. Even the sales staff, so smug just moments earlier, seemed suddenly uncertain. The officers walked directly toward Naomi, who was still standing beside the electric SUV, phone in hand. She didn't flinch. Didn't run. She simply turned her camera toward them and waited. "Ma'am," one officer began, hand resting near his holster, "we received a call about a suspicious individual refusing to leave the premises." Naomi held up her phone. "I'm recording this for my own protection," she said evenly. "I came to this dealership to purchase a vehicle in cash. I was refused service, laughed at, and then someone called you. I'm not leaving because I've done nothing wrong. One officer glanced at the staff, who stood off to the side, silent now, watching things spiral. A few customers had also pulled out their phones, sensing something wasn't right. A woman near the entrance whispered, "She didn't do anything," while another man muttered, "They really called the cops on her for trying to buy a car?" Naomi reached into her purse slowly and pulled out her wallet. "This is my ID," she said, handing it over. "And this," she took out a sleek black business card, "is my company. I'm the founder and CEO." The officer examined the card. His eyebrows lifted slightly as he read the embossed silver lettering. Naomi Ellison, Ph.D. founder and CEO, Cipher Trust Technologies. "We also have a seat on the board of Fairstone National Bank," Naomi added, "which, incidentally, is the bank that finances this dealership's inventory." The silence in the room was deafening. The officers looked at each other. Then one turned to the manager. "Is this the woman you reported?" The manager's face had gone pale. We didn't know." Naomi raised a hand, stopping him. "You didn't care to know," she said softly. Around the room, the mood had shifted completely. The doubt and suspicion that once lingered on Naomi now hovered over the staff. Phones continued recording. Because now, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a public reckoning, and Naomi was firmly in control. Naomi stood with quiet authority, the tension in the room pressing down like a storm about to break. The police officers, now visibly uncomfortable, had backed off. Customers were still filming, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering things like, "She's someone important," and "They really messed up." The dealership manager stammered, trying to regain composure. "Look, ma'am, maybe we just got off on the wrong foot." Naomi cut in, calm but firm. "I'd like to see the dealership's financing documents." The room froze. The manager blinked. I'm sorry." "The paperwork," Naomi repeated. "Loan agreements. Financing terms. Anything that shows your relationship with Fairstone National Bank." The salesman who had laughed at her earlier now stood behind the desk, silent as stone. "Ma'am," one of the officers asked quietly, "why would you want their financial paperwork?" Naomi turned to face the crowd. "Because I'm the majority shareholder in the bank that finances most of the cars on this lot." Gasps rippled through the room. Customers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Even the security guard, who had previously been loitering nearby watching her every move, took a step back. Naomi pulled out her phone again, this time scrolling through a secure folder. "Here," she said, holding up a digital document with an official seal. "This is my equity position in Fairstone National Bank, documented and filed." Then she tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. It rang once, twice. Then a crisp voice answered, "Naomi, everything okay?" "Yes, Marcus," she replied. "I'm standing in a dealership your team finances. I just need you to confirm that Cipher Trust Capital holds controlling interest in Fairstone's auto loan division." There was a pause. Then, "Absolutely. You're the primary stakeholder on record. Do you need us to pause their financing?" The manager's face drained of all color. Wait, that won't be necessary." Naomi looked directly at him. "I came in today to buy a car. Quietly. Privately. I didn't expect red carpet treatment. But I also didn't expect to be humiliated, laughed at, or have the police called on me." I didn't know," the manager stammered. "No, you didn't care to know," Naomi said, echoing her earlier words. "And that's exactly the problem." By now, half the showroom had their phones raised. Naomi wasn't just a customer anymore. She was a woman revealing the structural rot of prejudice, live and in real time. A woman they had tried to belittle was actually the one who could shut their entire operation down. And in that moment, every assumption they had made crumbled. The silence in the showroom was suffocating. The manager, just minutes ago so smug and dismissive, now stood slack-jawed, unable to find a single word. The salesman looked as if he wanted to disappear through the floor. Even the security guard took a few steps back, trying to avoid Naomi's steady gaze. Naomi turned to face the officers. "I appreciate your professionalism," she said calmly, "but your presence here was based on a discriminatory and false report. I'd like that reflected in your documentation." One of the officers nodded, visibly uncomfortable. "We understand, ma'am. We apologize for the inconvenience, and will make sure this is handled with full transparency." As if on cue, a flustered man in a suit burst through the dealership doors. His tie was crooked, face red with panic. The general manager. He scanned the scene, saw the cops, the crowd, the phones, and Naomi standing with absolute composure. His eyes widened. "Dr. Ellison," he blurted, rushing over. "I am so sorry. I just got the call. Please, if you'll allow us to explain." Naomi didn't flinch. "Explain what, exactly? That your staff violated your own anti-discrimination policies? That they called the police on a black woman for daring to want a car? Or that they mocked and dismissed a customer who also happens to be your largest financial stakeholder?" The general manager froze. "I had no idea you were." "That's the point," Naomi said. "I shouldn't have to be somebody important to be treated with basic decency." Customers murmured in agreement. Naomi stepped forward. "Here's what's going to happen. I'll be filing a formal complaint with your corporate office, and Fairstone's legal division will be launching an internal review of your financing eligibility. I suggest you prepare." The manager who had laughed at her earlier finally spoke. "Please, Dr. Ellison, we didn't mean to offend." Naomi looked him in the eye. "You didn't need to mean it. You just did it. That's the difference between ignorance and accountability." Phones were still recording. But Naomi didn't care. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reckoning. And in that room, at that moment, everyone watching knew. They had underestimated the wrong woman. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Clips of Naomi standing tall in the dealership, calm, poised, and exposing the financial truth behind the entire operation, had flooded TikTok, Instagram, and X. The hashtags #NaomiEllison, #DrivingWhileBlack, and #CashNotCriminal began trending across multiple platforms. One video had over 5 million views in just 12 hours. The footage was clear, a confident black woman calmly handling discrimination, revealing her position as the majority stakeholder in the very bank that financed the dealership. Her voice steady, her facts indisputable, her presence undeniable. The internet was stunned. This is what grace under fire looks like. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. That dealership just lost a queen and their credibility. By the afternoon, national news outlets had picked up the story. Major publications ran headlines like, "Entrepreneur mistaken for criminal. Turns out she owns the bank." "Luxury dealership faces backlash after calling cops on CEO." "Discrimination meets its match. Dr. Naomi Ellison speaks out." Public pressure mounted. Within 48 hours, the dealership's corporate office released a statement. "We deeply regret the incident involving Dr. Naomi Ellison. We do not condone discrimination in any form and are actively investigating the situation. Multiple employees involved have been terminated, and we are reviewing our training and diversity policies." But for many, the apology wasn't enough. Protests were organized outside the dealership. Local advocacy groups demanded lasting change, not just performative action. Through it all, Naomi remained composed. She issued a short public statement of her own. "I didn't share my credentials to boast. I did it because I was left with no choice. This isn't about me. It's about the assumptions people make based on skin color, class, or clothing. I hope this moment forces deeper reflection, not just for one dealership, but for an industry. Her response, measured, powerful, and solution-focused, was widely praised. Even business leaders and celebrities reposted her video with messages of support. One Fortune 500 CEO wrote, "Dr. Ellison's restraint was as remarkable as her credentials. May we all learn to listen before we judge." In a world often driven by outrage and chaos, Naomi's calm clarity had pierced through. She hadn't shouted, threatened, or cursed. She had simply shown up and let the truth do the talking. A week later, Naomi returned to the same dealership, but not to buy a car for herself. This time, she walked in with a young man by her side, Jalen Bryant, a 21-year-old black engineering student who had gone viral a year earlier for building a solar-powered bike from scrap materials. He came from a low-income background and was working 2 part-time jobs to stay in school. Naomi had read his story, reached out privately, and invited him to accompany her. As the cameras outside buzzed with anticipation, Naomi walked past the staff, many of them new faces, and calmly approached the sales desk. "I'm here to purchase the car I originally came for," she said, handing over a cashier's check. The employee, humbled and respectful, nodded. "Yes, Dr. Ellison. Right away." But when the keys were ready, Naomi turned to Jalen. "This is yours," she said. "Because no one should have to fight this hard to be seen, to be respected, or to be mobile in a world that tries to keep us in place." Tears welled up in Jalen's eyes. The crowd watching erupted into applause. But Naomi wasn't done. That same week, she formally launched the Fair Access Initiative, a non-profit dedicated to combating racial bias in high-end retail and auto sales. It would offer legal resources, financial literacy training, and secret shopper audits to expose discriminatory practices across the country. "We're done asking for dignity," Naomi said at the launch event. "We're building systems that demand it." The initiative was backed by several corporate donors within weeks, with Naomi pledging the first $1 million from her own foundation. She declined interviews, preferring her work to speak louder than her words. And on the nonprofit's website, front and center, sat a single quote from Naomi herself. "Never underestimate the power of quiet dignity. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't break. But it always, always wins." In a world hungry for noise, Naomi had reminded everyone of the impact of grace, strategy, and self-respect. And somewhere out there, a young black student now drove his dream car, not just because someone believed in him, but because someone refused to be underestimated.